never thought I'd hear my husband call me a burden.
Yes, you're a burden. You've become one to me, Renata.
I never thought I'd hear my husband call me a burden in my own sunroom, in the house I paid for twice over, and he never once knew it. My name is Renata Coleman, and 18 months ago, a truck ran a red light on Fenwick Avenue and took my legs the way a storm takes a roof, fast and without asking permission. I don't remember the crash itself. I remember the beige walls of the rehab center. I remember my husband, Marcus, sitting by my bed with his tie loosened, holding my hand like a man gripping a railing. He was good to me for a while. Then the visits got shorter. Then his phone became a permanent extension of his arm. And by month 9, he'd started saying things that sounded reasonable if you didn't listen too closely. Maybe it's time we talk about what's realistic. Tonight he came home in his good suit, carrying a leather folder like a man laying down cards he'd already decided to play. He didn't say my name first. He used to say it the second he crossed the door, an old habit from when we were courting, when he wanted to hear my voice before he even saw my face. Tonight he just stood in the doorway and said, "We need to talk." He sat across from me, not beside me. That told me more than the folder did. "I don't think I'm the man you need anymore," he said. "I built Coleman and Ash Design from nothing. And I can't build a company and be your—" He stopped. "But not soon enough." "Say it," I told him. "Your burden," he said. "I feel like a burden to you. And you've become one to me." The rain started up against the glass right then, soft, like it had been waiting outside for its cue. He slid the folder toward me like it was a business proposal instead of the end of 12 years. He'd already spoken to an attorney. He wanted it clean, amicable. He wasn't trying to leave me with nothing, he said, like that was generosity and not the least a man could do. I kept my face still. I had gotten good at that this past year and a half, keeping my face still while everything underneath it moved. What Marcus didn't know, what he'd never once asked me in 12 years, was who actually held the deed to the warehouse his firm was so proud of. He'd assumed it was luck, or an old family favor of my father's. He'd signed where his own lawyer told him to sign and gone back to choosing lobby artwork. He'd never once asked to see the operating agreement. I thought about my father that night, 6 years gone now, sitting across from me at this same table the week before my wedding, his glasses pushed up into gray hair, papers stacked between us. "You don't have to sign anything you don't understand," he'd told me. "Not even for love. Especially not for love." I had signed plenty that week, but not everything Marcus assumed I'd signed. That was the part he'd never needed to ask about. Not until now. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Odessa James, the family attorney who had drawn up the trust my father left behind, in an office that smelled like leather and old paper, the kind of smell that comes from a room where truths get kept safe instead of hidden. "He filed 2 weeks ago," I told her. "Irreconcilable differences." She read the papers with the unhurried patience of a woman who'd watched 100 marriages end and knew speed rarely helped anyone. "Does he know about the Ash Coleman Trust?" "He knows it exists. He's never asked what's in it." "Does he know the building his firm operates out of belongs to it? That the credit line he used to expand 3 years ago was collateralized against trust assets, assets your father left specifically to you, not the marriage?" I let myself smile, thin and without much warmth. Marcus has never once asked me a real question about money. Only questions about himself wearing a money-shaped coat. Odessa folded her hands. "Then I imagine the next few months are going to be interesting." I looked out at the gray Atlanta skyline, at cranes lifting steel over half-built towers, at a city that never stopped becoming something else. I thought about my legs, which might never carry me unassisted across a room again, and about the parts of me that had never needed legs to stand firm at all. "I'm not looking for revenge," I said, and mostly meant it. "I'm looking for the truth to catch up to him. Those aren't the same thing." They rarely start out the same, Odessa said. But sometimes they arrive at the same address. Coleman and Ash Design occupied the top 2 floors of a converted textile building in Old Fourth Ward. Exposed brick, steel beams, the kind of space that photographed beautifully and cost a fortune to build out. Marcus loved bringing clients up that industrial staircase slowly, letting them feel the space before he ever said a word, letting them understand that a man who could build an office like this could build anything. What he'd never dwelled on, not once in 3 years, was who actually owned it. The lease had come through a holding company called Ash Property Partners, on terms so favorable his own real estate attorney had once called it practically a gift. Below market rent, a 10-year term, an option to buy written in his favor. Marcus had assumed, the way successful men assume things that benefit them, that it had something to do with an old family connection of mine. He never asked to see the paperwork behind it. On a Tuesday morning, his office manager, a sharp young woman named Priscilla Doyle, knocked on his door with a look he didn't like. "There's a letter," she said. "From Ash Property Partners. Certified. Open it." "I think you should open it yourself, Mr. Ash." He read it twice before the words fully assembled into meaning. Ash Property Partners was exercising a clause in the lease, a clause his own attorney had once waved off as boilerplate, allowing the landlord to decline renewal at the end of the current term, now 11 months away, without cause. There was also formal notice that the firm's line of credit, the one that funded the second-floor expansion, had been collateralized against assets held by the Ash Coleman Trust. Per the arrangement, any material change in the marital status of a named beneficiary triggered a mandatory review. He read the phrase "named beneficiary" 3 times before it landed, cold and sudden, like a door slamming down a long hallway. His real estate attorney, Douglas Feld, arrived within the hour, looking apologetic in the particular way of men who'd missed something obvious and knew it. "The trust names Renata as sole beneficiary and trustee," Douglas said, spreading papers across the conference table Marcus had chosen for its reclaimed oak. "Her father structured it that way specifically. It predates the marriage. It was never coming let. Her signature was required for any collateral arrangement involving trust assets, which means she agreed to back your credit line voluntarily." "Why would she do that?" Marcus said. Even as an old memory surfaced, Renata across from him 6 years into their marriage, papers stacked between them. "I want to help you grow this, Marcus. But I need you to understand what it means if things ever go wrong between us." He remembered brushing past it, already reaching for his phone. "Because she loved you," Douglas said simply. "And because apparently she's not foolish." Marcus sat down heavy in his own chair. Through the window behind him, the city he'd built a career photographing carried on, indifferent to the fact that the floor beneath his firm, literally, structurally, belonged to the woman he'd called a burden 3 weeks earlier in their sunroom. "Fix this," he said. "I can try to negotiate," Douglas said carefully. "But I need you to understand your position. If she doesn't renew the collateral agreement, the bank can call the loan. If she doesn't renew the lease, you have 11 months to relocate an entire firm, and every landlord in this market will ask why your last one let you go. This isn't a negotiation you're winning from strength. She wouldn't do that to me." Douglas looked at him a long moment, the look of a man deciding how much honesty a client could carry. "With respect, you filed the papers. Not her. I hadn't orchestrated the letter's timing. I wanted to be honest with myself about that. Odessa had simply done what any competent attorney does the moment a marriage enters dissolution. Reviewed every entangled asset, every guarantee, every place where a crumbling marriage touched the structural walls of a business. The letter wasn't an act of war. It was an act of clarity. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some small, quiet satisfaction in imagining his face reading it. I sat with that satisfaction for exactly one evening, turning it over like a stone in my palm, and then I set it down. My father hadn't raised me to enjoy watching people fall. He'd raised me to understand that some falls are just the truth arriving late. I thought often those weeks about the early years, about the version of Marcus who used to sit on the floor beside my drafting table long after most husbands would have gone to bed, asking me questions about load distribution, not because he needed to know, but because he wanted to watch me explain something I loved. I'd been the one with the architecture degree, the eye for structure, before an economic downturn, and then a truck that ran a light took first my firm, then my legs. Marcus had been the hungry junior designer I mentored at my old firm, talented and a little desperate to matter. I'd believed in him before anyone else had. I wondered some nights whether that belief had been a gift or a mistake. Mostly I landed on both. Marcus called 4 times that week. I let all 4 go to voicemail. On the 5th attempt, he texted instead. "We need to talk about the trust. This affects both of us." I looked at the message a long time before I answered. "It affects your firm, Marcus. My trust was never ours. You made that distinction yourself when you call me a burden. I'm simply respecting it." He didn't reply for 2 days. When he finally did, it was 3 words. "That's not fair." I almost laughed alone in the sunroom, the rain starting up again against the glass like an old familiar friend. Fair, I thought, as if fairness were a word he'd earned the right to use. The meeting happened in Odessa's office on a gray Thursday, 6 weeks after the filing. Marcus arrived first, in a suit that fit slightly looser than it had 2 months ago, the thinness of a man who'd stopped sleeping well. He came alone, without Douglas, which surprised me more than I expected. Odessa rolled a chair out, so I could sit at the round table rather than across a formal divide. "I asked for this meeting," Marcus said before anyone else could speak. "So I should start." "Go ahead," I said. He looked at his hands the way he used to when he rehearsed client pitches in our kitchen, years back, terrified of not being taken seriously. "I've spent a month trying to fix the business problem," he said. "New landlord, new credit line, buy out the collateral somehow." Somewhere in the middle of all that, it occurred to me I hadn't spent 5 minutes trying to fix the actual problem. "Which is me." He exhaled. "What I said to you in that sunroom, like you were a line item I decided to write off. I've been telling myself a story for over a year, Renata, that I was overwhelmed, that I never signed up for this. And there's truth in that. Real fear about what our life was becoming. But the fear turned into resentment, and I let the resentment write the ending, instead of dealing with the fear like a grown man. I had waited a long time to hear something like honesty from him. Now that it had arrived, I wanted to sit inside the silence a moment longer before I filled it. "I'm not doing this out of grace," I said finally, my voice even. "I think you'd like to believe this is a redemption story. It might be, for you. But I need you to understand something first. When you called me a burden, you weren't describing me. You were describing your own fear of a life that didn't look the way you'd planned. I've spent 18 months relearning how to trust my own body. I wasn't going to spend one more minute of it shrinking myself to make you comfortable with your fear. I understand that. I don't think you do yet. But you might, eventually." I turned my wedding ring once around my finger, an old habit that no longer meant what it used to. "Here's what I've decided, and it isn't a negotiation. Odessa will draft an amended agreement. The lease renews. The collateral guarantee ends. You'll secure your own financing, on your own merit, without my name behind you. I think you're capable of that. I always did. That's why I mentored you in the first place." Marcus nodded slowly. "And the divorce proceeds. I'm not interested in staying married to a man who needed a certified letter from a property company to remember I was a person, not a problem to be managed. I don't want your firm to fail," I said. "Not out of some lingering love, though I won't pretend that's entirely absent. 12 years doesn't disappear because it ends badly. You built something real there. Punishing you by destroying it wouldn't heal anything in me. It would just make me smaller too. For a long moment, no one spoke. Outside Odessa's window, the Atlanta sky had begun to clear, thin bands of afternoon light cutting through the gray. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, and there was nothing performed in it. "Don't thank me," I said. "Just don't do this to the next person who loves you." 6 months later, I sat in the same sunroom in a new chair, motorized now, better suited to the modest independence my physical therapist, Julian, had helped me rebuild inch by patient inch. The house was mine alone. The settlement had seen to that, though I'd surprised even Odessa by not fighting for more than fairness required. I'd gone back to drafting, tentatively at first, sketches propped on a tablet against my lap, half-formed buildings taking shape the way they used to before the accident, before Marcus, before any of it. A small firm downtown had reached out about a consulting role. Accessible design, the kind of architecture that treats bodies like mine as a first principle, not an afterthought. I said yes before I'd finished reading the email twice. I thought sometimes about the wedding ring, which I'd finally removed the week the divorce finalized, setting it in the small wooden box my father once used for cufflinks. It had meant safety once, then obligation, then, in that last sunroom conversation, the shape of everything I'd lost. Sitting empty in its box now, it meant something quieter, proof I'd survived a version of myself who believed love required disappearing. Marcus's firm was still standing, I heard, smaller, leaner, financed on terms that cost him sleep and pride in equal measure, but standing. I didn't know if he'd changed in any way that would hold. I'd stopped needing to know that. Watching the light move slow and gold across the sunroom floor was its own kind of peace. Not vindication. Not even forgiveness, exactly. Just the simple, sturdy fact of no longer waiting for someone else's reckoning to tell me who I was. I had never needed my legs to be steady. I only ever needed to remember that I already was. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.